A major shakeup within the Trump administration. National Security Advisor Michael Flynn has resigned.
If he hadn't lied to Vice President Pence, I think he'd be perfectly fine because, quite frankly, he did nothing illegal.
It is my great honor to present our new Treasury Secretary.
I share your economic vision to grow the economy for all Americans.
He's trying to be a tough guy, so he's going to go after, the maids, the moms.
For the last 8 years, 1,000 people a day have been deported out of the United States. What's new is the liberal outrage.
Stolen away by Williams. Dangerfield will lay it up and in. UConn makes it 100 consecutive wins.
We were here in Florida warm up today with his high school chorus. They are unbelievable. It is 40-year anniversary of Florida.
It's amazing. Their songs are so good still to this day. They're awesome. And they're here. They were getting ready here in the green room. We were talking to them. Like, I've listened to your music for so long. It's really cool. Happy Valentine's Day to you at home, too.
And we would like to, as the camera pulls out, we would like to thank our friends at Urban Stems for all the flowers they brought by the studio today. By the way, if you're interested, Urban Stems could actually still deliver your flowers. If you give them a jingle, they'll have them to you by 3 o'clock
Steve, Brian.
And if there's anybody on the staff who forgot the flowers, there's an excellent chance this will be in your living room tonight.
If you were married to one of the men on our staff, take a close look, because these might end up in your home later.
Those are Kathy Ducey's right there.
Oh, no. You've got to call that. You have to call Urban Stems. You have to go on their website and you need to order her some.
All right, fine.
Yeah.
Right.
Urban Stems, which means they were grown in the city?
Perhaps.
Exactly.
Or sold in the city.
Have you all done your shopping for me?
Well, yes.
I am your TV wife.
Every year you do want cash.
Cash is good. Cash is great.
Give it $20. Happy Valentine's Day.
That's right.
Pays the bills.
It does indeed. Well, thank you very much for joining us on this St. Valentine's Day. And we start with the Fox News alert. Michael Flynn, the National Security Counselor to the President of the United States, becomes essentially one of the shortest-serving senior presidential advisors in recent history. He stepped aside because he told a lie to the vice president.
Perhaps. 24 days in, he is now stepping out. We do have reports that he didn't have an opportunity to stay, that Donald Trump didn't tell him to resign, that he resigned on his own. Christian Fisher has the story and can update us.
Yeah, hey guys, good morning. I was just going to say, let's be very clear here. President Trump did not fire Michael Flynn. He resigned. Not a totally surprising development, but still a stunning one. Just 25 days into this administration, this is the shortest tenure of any national security advisor ever. In his resignation letter, he wrote that, quote, unfortunately, because of the fast pace of events, I inadvertently briefed the vice president-elect and others with incomplete information regarding my phone calls with the Russian ambassador. I have sincerely apologized to the president and the vice president, and they have accepted my apology. Well, complicating matters even more for the White House is a report in the Washington Post that the Justice Department, specifically the acting attorney general at the time, Sally Yates, had warned the White House that Flynn was possibly vulnerable to Russian blackmail attempts, yet they did nothing about it until now. So, what next? Well, Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg has already been named acting National Security Advisor. He'd been serving as Chief of Staff for the National Security Council, and he's also in the running to fill the position full-time. Other names in the mix, Vice Admiral Robert Harward, he's a former Navy SEAL and former Deputy Commander of CENTCOM. He also served under Defense Secretary James Mattis. And then there's General David Petraeus. The president, he's been a fan of Petraeus for some time. He was actually rumored to be in the running for Vice President and Secretary of State, but he, of course, comes with some very heavy baggage. If tapped to be National Security Advisor, he'd still be under probation until April. So this is the first major shakeup of the Trump administration and also one of its first major tests as well. Back to you.
Right.
Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you, Kristen Fisher.
I know General Flynn and the president have been inseparable. And they've been almost at each other's sides from day one. He was be able to speak candidly to the President of the United States when he was candidate and President-elect. And I think it's a big loss. I think even over the weekend they were shoulder to shoulder through all this somewhat controversy. And as late as in the morning, I don't think there was any plan for him to step aside.
Well, but you can't you can't lie to the vice president. The vice president went out and defended him and said that they did not talk. He did not talk to the Russian ambassador to the U.S. about sanctions. And it turns out that he did.
Yeah, and apparently, according to the New York Times, Pence was angry that he lied to him and angry that he didn't fully apologize. And Steve Bannon, who also was down in Mar-a-Lago with Mr. Flynn and Mr. Trump over the weekend, Steve Bannon has been pushing for the resignation since Friday. So Mike Flynn is out. The big question is, will it be David Petraeus, perhaps? But then if you have David Petraeus, when Donald Trump out on the campaign trail makes an issue of Hillary Clinton's illegal email server, there's a problem with Petraeus.
They were worried that Russia could use it to blackmail the United States. But if he had told the truth in the beginning, would the Trump administration have looked past that, or is that something that...
Yeah, from what we know now, Charles Krauthammer said the exact thing, Ainsley, yesterday, is like, this is a cover-up without a crime.
Right.
That if you just come out and said it's okay to talk to him, but if you just come out and said what you said, brought up perhaps that the sanctions will be looked at, there probably wouldn't have been an issue. But however, a couple of things. Number one, on Petraeus, keep in mind, Donald Trump kept saying, look at what David Petraeus did. Nothing compared to what Hillary Clinton did. Number two, there's no doubt about it. David Petraeus would have been a leading contender for Hillary Clinton's Secretary of State. They were also extremely tight, and he said extremely kind things about Hillary Clinton. So if he goes up and they decide to, if he's a choice of President Trump, I do think that there would be a little bit of turbulence for people who are just going to attack Donald Trump anyway.
Well, they'll find someone to replace him that'll be the perfect candidate, because there are so many amazing men and women in this country that have served our country, and I have full confidence they'll find someone who's amazing.
Meanwhile, it looks like ICE, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency of the United States of America, is looking for some people with criminal records, violent criminals. But if you listen to the mainstream media, they are in hysterics about these, what have been routine raids during the Obama administration. Nonetheless, listen to how they reported what's going on last night.
What took place yesterday with raids in personal homes is part of the cog of the Trump deportation machine.
How inhumane this is, to be breaking down people's doors and separating parents from their children.
This is Donald Trump really executing his campaign plan. He's trying to be a tough guy, so he's going to go after, the maids, the moms, the people that are working in the shops, instead of going after the hardcore criminals.
The vast majority of undocumented immigrants in this country are not criminals, are not terrorists, are not gang members. Now it's my turn.
Go ahead.
Guadalupe Garcia. She's been in this country for 22 years. Look what Donald Trump did. This is what Donald Trump did.
So you just heard 2 sound bites ago, the guy goes, well, they're sweeping up maids and moms. Actually, no. 75% of them have been convicted of things like this.
Look at the list, guys. Homicide, aggravated sexual assault of a minor, lewd and lascivious acts with a child, and in an article I read, also indecent liberties with a minor, drug trafficking, assault and battery, driving under the influence, and weapons charges. Now, as a mother, there are 3 or 4 things on there that concern me the most. Obviously, they're all really bad, but lewd and lascivious acts with a child, sexual assault of a minor, indecent liberties with a minor. Get them out of the country. I'm fine with it. Who's not?
Well, I mean, the other thing is, I'd love to see how many profiles were done on the people that the Obama administration tossed out. 2 million. 2 million people. I was just wondering how many news breaks there were profiling what was going on there, and how many people on Univision where anchors were able to come up there and tear pictures in half on CNN, on MSNBC, that were, as you saw, that guy from Univision do that anchor from Univision do last night on Hannity.
Sure. It's unclear if the targeted raids are a change in policy or if this is just a continuation, because during the Obama administration, they deported a lot. Nonetheless, the people of the United States kind of like what they've seen so far with Donald Trump. According to a brand new Gallup poll, 62% say he keeps his promises, and about 60% say he is a strong and decisive leader as well.
Yeah, I mean, the negative things that he has, they came out on trustworthiness. He's underwater. He's got to work on that, and I think as soon as they get communications set coming out of the White House, they can get a communications planner as well as a press secretary, get everybody else in place. I think a lot of that could be handled.
These people came from 11 different states. It's not just border states that need to worry about this. L.A., Chicago, San Antonio, Texas, New York City, Southern California, New York. There are 11 different states where these illegal criminals were found.
Right, exactly. And so while the ICE raids 680 arrests in the past week, keep in mind there was 1 week last year during the Obama administration where they swept 2,000 people up. So, you know, nonetheless, you'll see this drumbeat on the other channels where it's kind of like they're going door to door. They're just finding out who's in the house.
But the majority of Americans are so glad. This is what he ran on.
Right.
It's what he promised.
He's not throwing out families that are law-abiding families.
Right.
There might be some caught up in the net, but for the most part, the focus is on the criminals. And next thing you know, he's going to leave the dreamers. He's going to secure the border. And since we can't do as a country comprehensive immigration, Donald Trump, as president, is doing little by little what the last 3 presidents were unable to do.
All right, let us know what you think. In the meantime, we're going to hand it over to Heather, who has some more headlines for us. Hey, Heather.
Good morning.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day to all of you. We are following a major story out of California, and it is a Fox News alert. A potential life or death emergency at the dam in Oroville, California. Oncoming storms now threatening those vital repairs that workers are doing to try to fix that crumbling main spillway. Crews racing against the clock to fix the massive holes after hundreds of thousands of gallons of water from Lake Oroville chewed through the concrete there. Nearly 200,000 people had to leave everything behind, fearing that the spillway will fail at any moment. Janice Dean is covering that weather situation. She'll bring you the latest as she gets it. Well, keep Guantanamo Bay open for business. That is the message from nearly a dozen U.S. senators in a new letter to President Trump supporting his campaign promise to continue using that facility in Cuba. The move, a major reversal from former President Obama, who worked hard to try to close that facility before he left office. 41 prisoners now remain at Gitmo. That's down from 242. Nearly 18% of the detainees released have returned to the fight, according to government statistics. Well, President Trump says the nation's financial system is in great hands thanks to his pick for Treasury Secretary.
I share your economic vision and goals and committed to working with you to enact policies to grow the economy and make better economic opportunities for all Americans.
Well, that's Stephen Mnuchin. He was sworn in overnight after a tough confirmation vote thanks to lawmakers on the left. Coming up next, VA Secretary nominee David Shulkin will be sworn in later this afternoon. And Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell already scheduling dates to vote for 6 more nominees, including Ben Carson for Department of Housing and Urban Development and former Texas Governor Rick Perry for Energy Secretary. And this little pup certainly did not win the agility competition at the Westminster Dog Show, but she did steal that show. Watch this.
Oh, don't be a beagle. Don't be a beagle. Come on. I was trying to check out a little bit of everybody left a message there.
No, still good.
And then you gotta, sniff and lick and itch and all that stuff. Well, Mia the Beagle easily distracted, but she did manage to finish that competition after all. The Westminster show ends tonight with the Best in Show award. Brian, something tells me your dogs would be doing that same thing.
Right, as soon as I get him out of rehab. But how do you train a dog not to sniff itself? Like how you can't.
That dog took home the award of being a normal dog.
Yeah, congratulations.
Right?
Yeah, most likely to be born into somebody else's house. There you go. All right, coming up straight ahead, Democrats are starting to tell their own party to move on.
What we did is we said, how offensive. Grow up. That's not reality for most of America.
But will they listen? Jaimu Green is facing that man in the DNC chair election battle. She is live next.
Plus, liberals sinking to a brand new low, attacking the first family, and now they're going after President Trump's grandkids.
About time.
Telling the voters that, oh, our opponent is offensive. When you're worrying about your damn paycheck, you're worrying about your job, you're worrying about where you're going to live, if your kids are ever going to go to school, they don't really give a crap about if the president is an insult dog. We did not offer a message to the people in Indiana or Ohio or Pennsylvania or Kentucky. What we did is we said, how offensive. Grow up.
I started early. That was DNC Chair candidate Ray Buckley telling the Democratic Party, to grow up. Jaimoo Green is also running to be the new DNC Chair. She was there. So what does she think about Buckley's remarks? Jaimoo, hi.
Hello, good morning. Happy Valentine's Day, Brian.
Back at you, and I know you dressed appropriately. Jaimoo, what was your thoughts about Buckley's remarks, and how does it differ, or how is it like yours?
Look, I think Ray Buckley's passion is representative of everyone on that stage. The energy in the DNC leadership elections really shows how engaged not just the Democratic Party infrastructure is, but all of that energy and passion we're seeing in the streets. 3 weekends in a row, massive protests against the administration. That's what needs to be funneled into the party. We need to create a welcoming home for the resistance.
So do you think the resistance is the answer, or an autopsy like the Republicans did is the answer?
Look, we have work to do, and anyone who thinks that the 2016 lens of what happened in this race and how the Democratic Party needs to rebuild, that it's only through a 2016 lens, they're sorely mistaken. There's work that has been building up to make sure that we actually have a strong infrastructure in the state. For 8 years, we lost over 1,000 seats around the country. So this isn't just about what happened in 2016. This isn't just about what happened with Trump. But given the fact of, look at what's happening right now with the administration, we don't have the luxury to not be the strongest party of resistance against this administration.
But what is your positive mission? So you can resist what's there, so what is your vision?
Well, we certainly have to tell our story better. And with all due respect, Brian, I think Democrats for too long have thought that the media was our friend. They are not. In 2016, we thought that we had a good relationship in which to share the economic policies and vision that Hillary Clinton was putting forward, to share her vision on comprehensive immigration reform, on her mental health policy. Guess what? The media said, we're not going to give you any airtime, any opportunity to talk about this. We're going to focus 100% on him or 100% on a scandal.
You have vision, determination, and a ton of energy. The Democrats would be wise to pick you. Hope it works out for you, Jaimoo Green. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right, 20 minutes now after the hour. Can a simple DNA swab predict whether you could become a drug addict? Up next, Dr. Hooman Melamed tells us about a revolutionary new test that may help stop America's deadly opiate epidemic. And is the Commander-in-Chief also a wedding crasher? The story behind these photos, straight ahead.
And thank you, baby.
Well, we got some quick Tuesday morning headlines for you right now. A military judge slamming President Trump, calling his words to describe disgraced Army deserter Sergeant Bo Bergdahl disturbing.
He's a dirty, rotten deserter.
That's what he said. Now, attorneys claiming in a pretrial hearing the former soldier can't get a fair trial because of what the now Commander-in-Chief said. Judge has not yet made a decision. Bergdahl is facing life in prison for abandoning his post in Afghanistan. The U.S. trading 5 of the Taliban's worst for his return. And just hours from now, the case of an inmate featured in the Netflix series Making a Murderer heads to an appeals court. Brendan Dassey is serving life in prison after admitting to detectives that he helped his uncle, Stephen Avery, kill a woman in Wisconsin. A judge overturning his conviction, saying investigators forced a confession when he was 16 years old, at the time with the mental capacity of a 9-year-old. All right, Ainsley.
Our nation in the grips of a deadly opioid obsession, and recent numbers from the CDC are revealing just how deadly it can be. In 2015 alone, more than 33,000 people died from opioid overdoses. But how do we stop this growing epidemic, which is clearly a problem? Well, a new DNA test explores the genetics of addiction, and it actually might hold the key to figure out if you and your family members have problems. Here to tell us more about it is Dr. Hooman Melamed. He is a spinal surgeon with Marina Del Rey Hospital, which is in California. Thank you so much for being with us.
Sure, absolutely.
So tell us about this DNA test.
DNA test is the approved opioid test, which assesses a patient's risk of developing an addiction, abuse to narcotic medications. And there is cross-reactivity with psychiatric disorders such as anxiety, depression, schizophrenia. And there's a genetic area in the brain called the brain reward cascade system, which helps to show if the patients can become addicted or have substance abuse issues.
How do you administer the test?
It's very easy, just a swab in your mouth.
Wow.
You just put a little swab in your mouth, and then the test goes, off it goes, and then about 2-3 weeks later, you get the results back.
And you can tell, based on the results, whether or not someone is going to be prone to an addiction. And you test your patients for narcotics.
Absolutely. The Prove Opioid test shows basically that what medication works for them. Wouldn't you want to know if you have like surgery or pain? Like rather than trying different medications, this works, this doesn't, you directly go to the medication that actually works for you, and the optimum dose and minimizing side effects.
So let's say you have a patient and you do the swab and you determine that they are predisposed to addiction problems. And do you give them medications? Because if they're prone to addiction, wouldn't they have a higher chance of being addicted?
Absolutely. So exactly what you just talked about in the beginning, like how this is an epidemic problem. We spend hundreds of millions of dollars, and the #1 culprit for giving out the opiates is the doctors. So knowing that knowledge that I have, I'm very careful on how much narcotic. And I tell the patients, I'm not here, the narcotics are not here for the pain. This is just for very, very short term. And I don't try to give it more than that. And knowing that results, I'm very careful, become very basically frugal in terms of how much I prescribe the medication.
So you operate on people's backs. You're a spine doctor, but before you administer surgery, you're going to do that swab to determine whether or not your patients are going to be addicted to their pain medicines, right?
Absolutely, and to see what the side effects are as far as what's the optimum dosing is, and not to give, it has been amazing. Some of the patients, when you give them the test, are like, oh my God, I know why this never worked. I always knew this medication doesn't work on me.
So why don't all doctors use this? It seems simple, because then you could prevent people from getting addicted.
Well, there's multiple reasons for that. I don't think we get the education in medical school. I never learned about it in medical school or residency. We just learned this is the pain, this is the protocol. There was a protocol to do. You're not educated on that. So somehow I always like to think outside the box, and somehow I came across this the Prove genetic test. And the other problem, I hate to say this, but doctors sometimes want a patient to be addicted because the patient keeps coming back so they can keep writing the medication. That's another huge problem that hasn't been looked into.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Former President Obama said this is the reason he refuses to call radical Islamic terror what it is.
Think that and claim that they're speaking for Islam. But I don't want to validate what they do.
But this morning, the real reason he refused to say radical Islam. That's next. And on this Valentine's Day, we have the secrets to improving your relationship, like scrapping date night. What? Or scrapbooking, as Brian likes to do. But first, we want to wish a happy birthday to Rob Thomas, the lead singer of Matchbox 20. He is 45 years old today. He's only 45.
You know that if you don't shut your mouth, she'll freak out. You better get your together, 'cause she's bringing it.
It was 31 years ago today, on Valentine's Day.
You haven't changed.
Valentine's Day, the most romantic day of the year. 31 years ago, I asked Kathy Garrity if she would marry me, and after a couple of drinks, she said yes.
And started dancing.
And she said yes immediately. That is at the Palm, down in Washington, D.C.
That's
31 years
great.
later. Here's to 31 more.
And is this you, Ainsley?
That's not
That's
me.
Woody and Joanne. They were married 41 years ago on Valentine's Day, 1976. Congratulations. Does that look like Ainsley?
I thought it was you.
I don't know.
I thought it was you.
I would never rent that tux.
Woody, thank you for
And that's a great picture, though. Tom and Sue Ellis, they met a few days after Valentine's Day in 1964. Here's the couple there celebrating 50 years of marriage.
Oh, that's fantastic. And Stacy and Carrie Hammett from Missouri met when they were on vacation in Hawaii. They returned to Hawaii this past summer with their kids to celebrate 25 years of marriage.
That's awesome. And then Jess and Michelle Coulter, they're from Missouri. Jess and Michelle met while they were both deployed in Iraq in 2007. 10 years later, they have 4, as you can see, beautiful children.
All right, send us your Valentine's Day photos from today and yesteryear. We'll be showing them all morning long against your will. Meanwhile, let's start talking about how to make your relationship better.
All right. Janice says it's all in the tiara. Janice brought this to me.
Well, what does the
morning.
prompter say?
All right, looking for a way to spice up your love life on Valentine's Day? How about scrapping date night?
Wait a minute. That's different. Here with secrets to improve your relationship, New York Times columnist and author of the new book, The First Love Story, Bruce Feiler. Good morning to you, Bruce.
Morning, guys. Nice to be with you.
Great to have you. We always heard date night was something you were supposed to set aside so you would have me time with the spouse. And you say that's not good?
No. So I've spent the last 10 years writing about what makes relationships work. And as you just heard, I spent the last 2 years looking at where it all began in the Bible with Adam and Eve, the first love story. And most of what we've heard. Most of what we heard, they stayed together. Come on, let's give them credit for that. Is wrong. So the date night, right? Okay, so we've been told set aside time, and that's fine. But here's the problem: routine is the enemy of romance, and novelty is the lifeblood. So if you're just going to go around the corner to the same restaurant, go see a movie.
Wednesday, it's date night. We got to go.
It's not going to work. So what you want to do is scrap that, do something new, go to a new part of town, get lost, try a new restaurant, you know, take a class together. And in fact, you don't even have to leave the house. Just eat in a different room, right? Cook a new recipe. Like, go make out on the washing machine. Something you did in college, it was fun. This will bring novelty. That's what you want as a new spark.
All right, so I love your second tip.
Loving major appliances. Who knew?
The second tip says sit next to each other. You know, every woman loves it when you walk in a restaurant and you see, like, the couple in the booth together. And every man is like, I would never do that. That's so embarrassing. But you say, don't worry about it. Sit in the booth together.
First of all, where do they do it? They do it in Paris at the cafe, sitting next to each other.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's how I learned this. So I've been married, you just asked me before you went on there, almost 14 years. And we would put the kids to bed, and my wife would come into my office, and we'd get into a fight. So I got a psychologist to come to the house. Exactly. And it turns out we were doing everything wrong. First of all, I was at my desk. I had the computer equipment, right? My feet up on the table. My wife is in a broken down chair from my first apartment, her arms crossed, upset. Turns out, number one, sit at the same level if you're having an important conversation. And I was just thinking, this is why it works on this set. Sit next to each other, because if you're across from each other, that's going to bring out conflict. If you're next to each other and if you're having a serious conversation, soft surfaces, you'll fight less.
That is so interesting. By the way, it might be in theory great in France because they speak French, but if you're like out with your date and you're like this, it's awkward. You're talking to, hey, how you doing? What's going on? Then you end up like this.
Yeah, you end up like this, Brian.
So what's the point?
Because you're next to each other and you're touching and your legs are touching
because
and
sitting
you get to
across
cuddle.
from you makes it sort of naturally creates this tension. Right. That's what you're wanting to do. So we actually literally got a bench in our living room. Important conversations, we're sitting next to each other.
That's so interesting.
And it shows the entire restaurant that you love your wife.
Right, and or that you're expecting two other people to sit across from you. Here's the other thing: when you get into an argument or you have a conversation, don't use the word you. That's so interesting.
I'm going to get in a lot of trouble for saying this because I actually do this in my own house. Yes, you always do this. You never do that.
Wait, you got to stop it with the finger.
Well, that's my point. So it's the declarative statements. You're taking a small thing and making it big. Say I, as in me, or the number one thing is we. When you're building partnerships, because look, all relationships have conflict. What you want to do is minimize the conflict. And I think one of my kind of number one rules for happy relationships, spend less time worrying about what you do wrong, more time focusing on what you do right. So make a positive memory so when you're fighting, it'll help you get through it.
I think this has been a very shined a spotlight on you, Bruce, because you do this for a living with the New York Times.
Because with the problems that we had, I was like, we can't be the only ones who have it, okay?
Right. We had someone come everybody's my point.
We have this problem with my wife puts piles everywhere, and they bug me. And so we got someone to come check out the piles, and she said, those are aspirational piles. She would like to organize them someday. It was a complete disaster. So now we have the piles, and my wife says, look, they were approved piles.
You know how to spin. That's what it basically is.
It gave you material for your books.
Exactly.
And you're a bestseller. And you're coming here and sharing all this information about
Happy anniversary to his wife who's watching right now.
Yeah.
And
if you write books about love, you're not allowed to mess up, though, are you?
No. That's the problem. But you know, you can mess up. Adam and Eve do it. You can mess up, and you can reconcile. In fact, we all have ruptures. It's the mending that matters.
Right. And by the way, Foreigner's going to tell us what love is a little bit later, at the end of the show. They're going to sing about it.
Wow.
All right.
Awesome.
Let's just hope they don't do cold as ice. All right. Meanwhile, it's cold as ice outside. Janice's got the weather from the streets of New York City.
But we're all going to snuggle up because it's Valentine's Day, right?
That's right.
And we're wearing our little Valentine's Day tiaras,
Thank
right,
you for
Ainsley?
bringing this to
I'm
me.
sorry I
Yes.
didn't bring it for the boys.
That's
My
okay.
apologies. You know what? My husband proposed to me on this week 10 years ago. Not on Valentine's Day because he thought it was a little bit cheesy, but no offense to you, Mr. Ducey, but he did propose to me 10 years ago this week.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Happy Valentine's Day. Let's take a look at your maps. And it is a little cold outside, but we are going to snuggle today. Across the Northeast, it's 28 here in New York City, 40s across Texas. We have this warm front moving across portions of the Gulf Coast and this area of low pressure. And that's going to give us, unfortunately, the threat for severe weather. That's not up there because it's Valentine's Day. That is a tornado watch, my friends, across portions of southeast Texas, including the city of Houston. No tornado warnings, but that is up to warn folks that we could see large hail damaging winds, isolated tornadoes, including the city of Houston throughout the morning and the afternoon. And of course, we're watching the west, guys, where we're expecting more bad weather and wet weather for Central California, where we are watching that dam potentially breaking in the next couple of days. So we will watch that as well. So a couple of severe weather stories. And it is Valentine's Day, so I'm happy to toss to you guys inside.
Thank you very much.
On the couch.
And Janice, I just got a note from my neighbors Ray and Ellen. They got engaged 29 years ago today.
Nice, nicely done.
Tell them to send a picture or a sketch.
We all need our tiaras and our boas today.
There you go.
It's a happy day. All right, let's hand it over to Heather, who has some headlines for us. Hey, Heather.
Yeah, good morning. Good morning to all of you. We are finally learning why the Obama administration did not use the term radical Islamic extremism. There is a former State Department official who's now breaking his silence to the New York Times. Richard Stengel says the White House was afraid of offending our Middle Eastern allies when describing horrific acts by ISIS or al-Qaeda as Islamic extremism. He writes in the New York Times, in part, quote, to defeat radical Islamic extremism, we needed our Islamic allies, and they believed that the term unfairly vilified a whole region. That in the paper today. Take a look. Well, you can't get much lower than this. Mothers in New York City are now taking aim at President Trump's 4-year-old grandson. The New York Post reporting today that moms on urbanbaby.com are debating whether or not to boycott a school where one of Donald Trump Jr.'s sons is rumored to attend in the fall. One of those moms writing this, quote, you want to spend 9 years worried that DS, which stands for Darlene's son, is getting infected with Trumpism? Really? And did President Trump's and Japan's prime minister take a page out of the movie Wedding Crashers playbook? Watch this.
I sent an out along today and I said to the Prime Minister of Japan, I said, come on, Shinzo, let's go over and say hello.
That's sweet, right? Most brides and grooms would love that. It turns out the president was personally invited. The newlyweds telling TMZ that the groom's parents are longtime members of Mar-a-Lago. The president saying he RSVP'd, saying he'd make an appearance if he could, and it looks like he kept his word. And those are your headlines. And some folks making fun of that. But nice that he would show up and do that.
What a memory.
Sweet, yeah.
All right.
All right, thanks, gang.
Thanks, Heather. Well, media claims maids and moms are being rounded up by ICE, but the truth is 75% of those rounded up are violent criminal offenders. The judge here with the facts you won't hear anywhere else on this Valentine's Day.
President Trump is making good on one of his signature campaign promises.
Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents arresting nearly 700 illegal immigrants last week, as Homeland Security confirmed 75% of them are violent criminal offenders. Here to react is Fox News senior judicial analyst Judge Andrew Napolitano. Judge, a lot of people outraged by this, but this is business as usual over the last 9 years.
Well, this is what Donald Trump said that he was going to do. There are several classes of people that are here illegally. Somebody comes on a visa, overstays, gets married, has a family, has a job, gets a Social Security number, pays taxes, lives like the rest of us, even though they're here illegally, doesn't break the law. Another person comes here, commits a crime, prosecuted, convicted, serves their time, is ordered deported, and doesn't go home. Now, you have two very different classes of people. One is harmless and actually productive, but here illegally. The other is harmful, has committed a crime, and is here illegally.
75% of them are harmful. The 25% are not.
Correct. Trump is going after the 75% that are harmful. So suppose Brian is the non-harmful and I'm the harmful and he's hiding me in his house.
Arrest both of you.
They'd probably arrest both of us because neither of us is entitled to be here. In this scenario, I've committed the crime. He hasn't, but we're both here illegally. So the Department of Homeland Security is trying to think about, do we really want to break up his family? Again, in this hypothetical. His wife is an American, his kids are American. No, they want to go after the guy who's dangerous, who's committed a violent criminal act, even though, in this hypothetical, I've served my time.
And in this hypothetical, this is how dangerous you would be. Let's put up this full screen
keep
of what
using me as the
75
example.
You started it.
Right.
This is what they're being arrested for. They were convicted of homicide, aggravated sexual abuse, sexual assault of a minor, lewd and lascivious acts with a minor, drug trafficking, assault and battery, driving under the influence, weapons charges, and drug trafficking.
All right, now I'm going to give you some bad news, and that is if the person has not yet been ordered deported, they're entitled to a trial on deportation and an appeal. The government has its own lawyers. The government pays for their lawyers. Cost of the lawyers to prosecute, trial and appeal. Cost of the lawyers to defend, trial and appeal. Cost of the system, trial and appeal. $250,000 per deportation.
Wow. Kidding me?
You can't just ship them out.
No, all on the taxpayer's dime. The taxpayers pay for everything.
Did Donald Trump change that with executive order?
I don't think he can change that. The Supreme Court has ordered that, has ruled that they're entitled to lawyers, and the Supreme Court has ruled that if they can't afford the lawyers, the government has to pay
See,
for
the
it.
difference in administration is all going to be what happens next. For the most part, a lot of these guys were scooped up, and these family people were scooped up, and they were given a ticket. You come back and appear, and they never show up again, right?
Right.
So now the follow-through is going to be key.
Well, you don't keep getting the deportation trials. You get one trial and one appeal. So if you're ordered deported, and then you just disappear among the populace, and then they find you, you're gone. You don't get a second trial. But it's that first trial and appeal that costs us collectively $250,000.
It's interesting, too. All of our areas are represented, too, because 190 were arrested in Georgia and North and South Carolina, hundreds from 6 Midwestern states.
Nobody from New Jersey?
From LA. 41 arrested from New York. You're a New Yorker now. You live here. And 51 arrested in San Antonio. But there are 11 different states that were represented. So this is not just the border towns.
No, because people don't always stay in border towns. And General Kelly, Secretary Kelly and his people have an idea where these folks are, and they're going to find them.
He said he was very impressed with the professionalism which they executed these deportations. He witnessed
I didn't see any. I saw a lot of the clips. I didn't see any violence.
All right.
Thanks, Judge.
All right,
Great to
guys.
see you.
All the best.
Valentine's
Thank you. I see Kilmeade's wearing his Valentine's red. Do you see it? It's there. You just can't see it.
Some people are blue on Valentine's Day.
I can't say that, but I can say what I'm wearing. Let me tell you what's straight ahead. As more refugees pour into the country, what can the after effects of war teach us about national security? An interesting perspective from someone who's seen it unfold in the Middle East firsthand.
And breaking overnight, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn stepping down now as the National Security Advisor. Washington's waking up right now and reacting to all of this. Reactions are pouring in, including from General Flynn himself.
Hundreds of refugees arriving here in the United States in the week after a federal court blocks the president's temporary immigration order. But our next guest claims our vetting process has kept us safe, and the greatest security lessons come from our own wars. Here to explain is the author of the book, War, The After Party, Brian Gruber.
Thank you, Steve. It's a privilege to be here.
It's great to have you as well. So, you know, the president has made a big deal out of extreme vetting. He says it's a great thing, and there are some on the political left who say, we really don't need it. We need to let these refugees in. What's your message?
I think anyone saying that would be stupid. Of course, we should not just let people in. We should do largely what we've been doing, possibly with some tweaks, where over the last 18 to 24 months, you have to go through a very difficult process to get in this country. The question for me is, what's extreme vetting?
Well, sure.
And should we be fair to people of all faiths and occupy the rule of law?
Well, I'll tell you what, Brian, the number one country that the refugees have come from to the United States since the temporary ban was, it was halted by the courts, was Syria.
Yeah.
Syria is a place where when ISIS rolled in, they took all the blank passports. We don't know who a lot of these people are.
Yeah, of course, when we look over the last 10 years and look at the number of terrorist incidents in the United States that were carried out by Syrian refugees or Iraqi refugees or Somali or Yemeni, the answer to that would be zero. So let's be diligent, let's protect ourselves, but let's look at our immigration policies and not do things that, by the way, will alarm people in the Muslim world.
All right, so you went to all these hotspots, nations that have had civil wars, wars of various lengths, to figure out what?
I think, what are we doing that's working? What are we doing that's not working? So I thought, why don't I do a citizen audit? Why don't I strap on a backpack, do a Kickstarter campaign, fly to Guatemala City, travel around the world, and go to these places that we've been in the last 50 or 60 years, and simply ask with no preconceived notions, do we achieve the mission that our leaders in government tell us we're going to achieve? And what are the real costs, human and financial costs, on both sides of the gun barrel?
All right, what'd you find?
Well, I found generally violence rarely achieves desired political objectives. I mean, all the people I know are not Pollyannas. Most people I know are not pacifists. They think we should have the most powerful military in the world. In the back of the book, I quote Gore Vidal, who called us the United States of amnesia. We don't remember anything before Monday morning.
Why are you getting into another war? The last one didn't work out.
That's right. So let's be willing to engage in the world. Let's have the strongest military in the world. But let's see what's working and what's causing big, ugly, unanticipated consequences, not the least of which are tens of thousands of wounded Americans.
Interesting stuff. Check out the brand new book, the book that is just out, another edition. It's called War, the After Party. Brian Gruber, we thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Steve.
All right. All right. And she took over the Grammy headlines with her Make America Great Again dress, and her record sales have exploded this morning. Pop singer Joy Villa joins us live.